We're going over System Pticha, Preface to the Wisdom of Kabbalah by Bala Sulam. Chapter 4, there's the Khut purification of the Masach screen to the Atzilut emanation of the Partzuf face. Session 20, Surrounding Light, the Plan. Before and after reflection.
Before and after reflection. Balaha Salam, item 32. This thoroughly clarifies the meaning of the Or Makif, surrounding light of Ak, primordial man, whose immensity is immeasurable. Yet, this does not mean that Ein Sof, boundless, which fills the whole of reality, is in itself considered the Or Makif, surrounding light of Ak, primordial man. Rather, it means that a Savug Dehaka, mating by striking, was made on the Malhut kingdom of the Rosh head of Ak, primordial man. The Ein Sof, boundless, struck the Masak screen positioned there. In other words, it wished to dress in Behina Dalet di Ak, phase 4 of primordial man, as prior to the Zimzum restriction, but the Masak screen in Malhut di Rosh, Ak, kingdom of the head and primordial man, struck it. This means that it detained it from spreading in Behina Dalet, phase 4, and repelled it, item 14. The Or Hoser reflected light that emerged from the pushing of the light back became Kli vessels for the clothing the upper light as well. Explanation, item 32. This explains the meaning of the surrounding light after the barrier, whose intensity is great. Yet, this does not mean that all the tension in reality is not handled. Rather, it means that the reflection on reality was made by the individual as a calculation after the barrier, that the tension of reality struck the screen positioned at the top of the individual phase. In other words, the tension was attracted to enter the perception of the individual, just like before the barrier, but the screen in the individual repelled it, item 14. This is reflected light that emerged from the pushing of the tension back became contemplations for clothing the tension of reality to prepare it for the conversion to internal power.
Surrounding light. Explanation. Item 32. This explains the meaning of the surrounding light after the barrier, whose intensity is great. Yet this does not mean that all the tension in reality is not handled. Rather, it means that the reflection on reality was made by the individual as a calculation after the barrier, that the tension of reality struck the screen positioned on top of the individual face. In other words, the tension was attracted to enter the perception of the individual, just like before the barrier, but the screen in the individual repelled it, item 14. This reflected light that emerged from the pushing of the tension back became contemplations for clothing of the tension of reality, to prepare it for the conversion to internal power. So what we have here is, what is the surrounding light? So we have here the light, the direct light, which is basically the thoughts and emotions of the individual that come into the person, come into the individual, and they come in down as Keter, crown, Chochmah, wisdom, Bina, understanding, Tiferet, beauty. And instead of the light actually entering into the individual, which is Malchut of kingdom, which is the paired mouth, there's a screen positioned right on top of the Malchut of the kingdom. And then instead of the direct light entering into Bechina Dalet, into the phase 4, it gets reflected. And it gets reflected where you've got Keter crown, which is the root of the reflected light, Chochmah, wisdom, Bina, understanding, Tiferet, beauty, and Malchut, kingdom. And then the question is, so what is the Or Makif, the surrounding light? So the idea is that if I have the light, which is, let's say, 100%, trying to enter the vessel, but the Malchut, which is actually the most of the light, so let's say this is 80%, so what you're going to have is only 20% actually entering the individual, and 80% of it is going to be reflected. So then what you're going to have is that out of that 80%, 20% of it is going to clothe all the way up to the crown, and then you're going to have 60% of it, which hasn't entered, becomes the Or Makif, the surrounding light. And the idea is that we, just like in reality where what we see is what is reflected to us, the idea is that we can only see what is being clothed. So only the direct light which is being clothed by the reflected light, that's what becomes in the end the different lights.
What do you mean Malchut receives only 80% from the direct light?
So that is, if we're saying
Malchut Malchut includes in it all of the other phases.
No, so the Malchut doesn't include all the other phases. The Keter crown includes all the other phases. So Keter crown includes it all. But the idea is that what you're clothing is only the amount that you're going to be able to receive, which is Keter crown, Chochmah, wisdom, being understanding, Tiferet, beauty. You have an inversion between the vessels and the light. So think of it as the most intense, right? Because we're not talking about physical location. The most intense tension is going to be in Malchut, in kingdom. And we're reflecting that tension. So all that tension, where's it going? It's clothing the tension that we're going to receive. And then the rest of it is on top. Shining from above. Which means that it's tension that will have an effect, but it's going to have an effect sort of as a signal of the future and not in the present time. It's what you're going to receive, not what you've received currently. It's like an advertisement that advertises you what you will get, not what you currently have.
You said in the beginning that the Or Makith represents our emotions and stuff, the tension itself.
The light is tension. Light is thoughts and emotion. And the idea is if you've got direct light, there's the thoughts and emotions that come directly to your perception. And if you're reflecting them, which means you're, as we say in English, you're doing a reflection on it, right? You're reflecting on it, you're observing it. And actually the calculation in the head is called observation. You're observing the thoughts and emotions that come into you. And instead of what normal people do, is that they think that their thoughts and emotions are their own. The idea is that when you cross the barrier, when you enter spirituality, you've got this ability to observe your thoughts and emotions as if from above. It's like the thoughts and emotions divided into two. You've got the thoughts and emotions that would normally be thought as your own. And then you have thoughts and emotions that are on those thoughts and emotions. Right, that observe the thoughts and emotions. So you basically become like two different sets of thoughts and emotions. You have the direct set of thoughts and emotions, which is what normal people, think and feel. And now you're taking a bit of that and you're reflecting it. You're making it into to observe what you're feeling and what you're thinking. So normally when someone thinks something or feels something, they're like, this is what I feel. This is what I think. And they don't have the ability to observe it from the side and not claim that those thoughts and emotions are their own. They don't have that ability to understand that they're causing those thoughts and emotions to come to them. That just because I think something doesn't mean that it is me. Just because I feel something doesn't mean that I should respond directly to that emotion. For that ability to observe it, that's what the reflected light allows you to do. It allows you to be above yourself. Observe yourself from the side, just like somebody else outside of you would be able to observe. The reason why people outside of you are not able to observe is because they don't feel your feelings as their own. So if you're feeling something, they're able to observe it and take a bit of it, take a bit of the emotion for them to feel, but they don't take the whole of it. They don't take all the tension. They don't start saying, oh, if you felt it, that means that I did it. And the idea is for a person to sort of take that ability to observe and say, just because I think something, just because I have an emotion, doesn't mean that it's me. It divides the person between their self and their thoughts and emotions. And allows the self to, on one hand, exclude those thoughts and emotions, but then able to actually observe and contemplate on them.
So it's like one is the observation and one is the action.
What do you mean?
What I mean is that the reflected light would be the observation of the direct light coming in and reacting with you, the thoughts and emotions that you're having from that light, the tension that it creates.
Yes. And because if you can observe it, then you can, like, in the head, it's called observation, right? Histaklut. And then in what you feel inside your perception is called the body, which is hitpashtut. And that expansion is already as internal power. Because you've already taken, because you've done an observation, because you've got, and remember, it's not like you are conscious of the observation. The observation is a side effect of you having the screen, of you being in spirituality and not being in shell. So it's not that the thoughts come in and then you're like, okay, what am I going to do with it? That's automatic. What you feel consciously is the body. But you understand that there was a calculation beforehand that allowed you to be above yourself, to be above reality, to feel yourself as separate from reality and not take everything as, this is my life. It allows you to have that observation from the side. But it's not that you're having to consciously see reality as it is and then observe. See reality as and then observe. You're already in that observational point. That means it already happened in your subconscious before it even reached your conscious point. So the unconscious point is what is above the body, which means in the head. And we actually attain from the body, but we understand that there's a calculation beforehand.
Where's the body in this picture?
The body would be here in the individual, below the mouth. So this is the head, and this calculation, we only are aware of it after the lights have actually entered the individual. I like other methods where you have to do mantras, you have to read positive things to reinforce and understand stuff. The idea is that when you advance through the phases, it becomes your natural state. Your natural thing is to be able to observe. And it's very subtle, but when you understand it, you're suddenly like, wow, yeah, I'm able to observe so much more of my own thoughts and emotions than ever before. And it's effortless. It doesn't require me to, go into the forest and then have a conversation with myself. Just in everyday life, I can be from that position.
That's I was reading over this and some other stuff earlier, and I sort of start to understand that the reason I'm not feeling the sensations and stuff that I felt before is because the screen has made it such a subtle thing that it's almost non-existent to me.
But you can see the difference.
Oh, I can totally see the difference. I can feel the difference, in sensations and stuff, but it's just, and in my perception, but there's just no tension to me. I mean, not like the tension I was feeling before, even close.
Well, that's part of the state of greatness. But I think many people are disappointed that spirituality doesn't, suddenly change your eyesight and doesn't suddenly give you, physical powers and stuff. And it's, yes, on one hand, it's very nuanced, but it is really powerful. So unlike what normal people think is power, it's very coarse, it's very physical. And here the power becomes something much more subtle. It becomes the way you view life, the way you feel about life, the way you think about yourself, and the way you view others, that you're able to do all these different separations on multiple levels. So you can separate between yourself and your thoughts and emotions. You can separate between your whole self with your thoughts and emotions and reality. You can separate between the personalities of people and the actions they do. You can do all these different separations that you can't do before, or require sort of more conscious work to do before. And then after you actually cross the barrier, it becomes effortless. It's just your standard, it's your state. You're not having to do something.
What's confusing to me is the fact that you put the screen over the malchut of the direct light, where I thought that the screen is over the malchut in the vessel.
From the malchut is where the phase forward. This is where the individual starts. So you've got the head, right, of the individual, which is doing the reflection, and then this afterwards goes, it sort of switches sides, and instead of going backwards, so going from bottom to up to top, which means from coarse to pure, it actually goes in the end from pure to coarse. It goes inside the individual.
In previous diagrams, the individual started from the bottom of Malchut downwards, and it had Keter and first phase, second phase, and so forth. And what's confusing here is that you're putting the screen over the Malchut phase of the direct light.
Because the idea is that the head is representing what happens afterwards in the body. So it's complete copy, right? So that it has to retain the same aspects. So just like in the body, it's not received into the malchut, right, which is into the ego, the same is done in the head. But you're like, yeah, but the head is above the individual. True. But the same process has to happen. There's a calculation of how much I'm receiving and how much I'm not receiving, which is done above the individual. That process then duplicates into the individual itself.
So am I correct to say that had we wanted to show the individual in full, then we would have put a block of Keter under Malchut and Chochmah underneath it and so forth?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so that's helpful. But what is the mean? So basically, the fact that we're not receiving in Malchut, you conclude from that there's a screen over the Malchut of the direct light?
Yeah, that's the idea that you're not receiving into Malchut, you're not receiving into the ego. Malchut represents the egoism of the person. So the idea is that when you're in primordial man, which is after the barrier, and we'll see afterwards in the slides, you're only receiving into the parts of you which are the inclusion of the previous phases. So it means into the phase 4 itself, it is divided into 4 phases, or 5 phases with the root phase, right? So inside phase 4, there is the root phase, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. Only in the phase 4 of phase 4 are you not going to receive, because that is the individual aspect itself. The other parts of phase 4 are just sort of like preparations for it. And since every phase includes all the previous phase within it, the idea is in all those previous phases you can receive the light. And it's only in the intensity of the individual itself is there sort of a issue to receive the light. You don't want to receive directly into yourself, directly into your sense of self, into the individual, you don't want to receive the light, because if you receive the light there, then what will happen is that you won't have the ability to observe yourself. So for the ability to observe yourself, you have to be above yourself.
So you have to gain the separation.
Exactly. And the way you do that separation is by blocking part of it. It's like if someone's filled with pleasure, they can't actually do any observation. If someone's in ecstasy, if someone's totally enjoying themselves, they can't observe what they're doing.
So tell me if I got the numbers right. The direct light Keter to Malchut before the barrier is 100%. We see that after you cross the barrier, you only receive in the first Chochmah, Bina, and Tiferet of the body. From that...
Also Keter.
And Keter, right. Let me take a step back. The 100% you're saying is divided, the majority of it, 80% is in Malchut, and the rest is in the upper 4 phases.
Right.
Which requires some kind of explanation, but we'll park that aside for a moment. From our observation that after the barrier, we're only receiving the first upper phases, Keter, Chochmah, Bina, and understanding of the body, Keter, Chochmah, Bina, and Tiferet, of the body, we conclude that the calculation that takes place in the head is such that the Malchut of the direct light's got a screen above it, just as presented in the picture. Exactly. Now, if we're talking about numbers, it means that all of the light, which is 80% that was supposed to have gone into Malchut, is now reflected upwards.
Yes. When
it's reflected upwards, 20% of it is clothing the 20% of the first 4 degrees, right. And 60% is the Or Makif.
Yes.
Okay.
And these percentages just to show an idea. It's not that it actually works percentages like that.
So can you explain a little more about the notion that prior to the barrier, Malchut receives like 80%, while the other phases receive the rest of the 20%? What does that mean exactly?
No, before the barrier, the Malchut receives 100%. What we're talking about here is after the barrier.
Okay, so yeah, no, actually not quite. Yeah, if I took the screen off and I would present the full body of the person underneath, then all of the 100% of direct light would go into it, right?
Yes, but not after the barrier. The barrier, there's the rule restriction, right? The first
No,
restriction.
no, before the barrier, all the 100% would go in.
Yes.
In that 100%, are you saying that Malchut is about 80% and the rest is 20, or is that something you're saying only for the post-barrier phase?
No, I'm saying before, if you broke it up, you would see that 100%, which is received in phase 4, you've got 20% in the phases that sort of are the preparation for phase 4, for the individual, right? Which would be the nature, the humanity, the society, the group within the individual, and then 80% of it would be the individual itself.
But how can I get a sense that indeed the majority of the light is in Malchut? Does that have to do anything with the tension felt towards the different phases? I mean, I would have agreed with you had you said that Malchut receives 10% and the rest of the phases receive 90%. But you're saying that the majority of the light, the majority of reality is received in the kingdom.
Yeah, well, think of it like this. We talked about it that after primordial, when you cross the barrier, when you enter primordial man, you're mostly dealing with just the level of nefesh, of relaxation. And all the lights that we say of, you have singularity and protection, those are just sub-phases of relaxation. So on a macro level, you're dealing with just relaxation. So it's like, well, why am I just dealing with relaxation? I thought, shouldn't I have, I've got the stronger screen, so shouldn't I be receiving all the lights? Right? And the idea is that the reason you're only dealing with relaxation is because you're above your ego. And the only feeling a person can feel when they're above their ego is relaxation. And it's only when you include the tension of the ego, then you can talk about feeling higher levels of power, of feeling modulation, protection, expression, singularity. Those are all emotions that only work when you include the tension of the ego. But when you're after the barrier, just above your ego, you're just feeling relaxation. And the only reason that the lights then are, you've got protection of relaxation and so forth, is just to show you how that relaxation divides into pieces. But the idea is that you're dealing with just relaxation. It's like someone going on vacation, right? They're going away from all their problems in life, and they're escaping to a place where they can relax. That's what vacation is. So the idea is that going back into your ego, which is, after 2.1, after the barrier, that's when it's like you return from vacation. You had a great vacation, and now you have to start doing the work. And now you're into your ego again, partially, and you're starting to, make observations in there and applying different power structures and gaining more and more higher feelings of control over your life.
You're saying the reflected light is 80% because that's the 80% that should have been in Malchut?
Yes.
And that reflected light then it makes the vessels, but also becomes the Or Primi?
Well, the idea is that the 20% that you've clothed, then that's what enters the individual with that clothing. So it's like direct light clothed with reflected light.
So it's only 20% would go into the individual instead of the 80% that is the reflected part of Malchut.
Exactly. So you're basically missing 60%.
Yes. 60% are, you're saying that, let me clear my head a second.
You're missing 80% of it being...
Of Malchut, right? 80% from Malchut, which is the reflected light that makes your vessels in the Rosh, right? And this reflected light, then you're saying is that out of that 80%, only 20% of it goes into the individual. The rest makes up the vessels.
The rest is surrounding light. It's not even...
the rest is just reflected as surrounding light.
Yes, yes.
At the end of what you're saying is that 20% of direct light clothed with reflected light goes into the vessel, and 60% surrounding light is left outside.
Yes.
That's a total of 80%. Where's the 100% of the direct light?
Well, remember that reflected light and direct light are not two different species. It's just light, whether it's reflected or direct. So if it's directly going in, that would be 100%. And if part of it is going to be reflected, right, that is the direct light being reflected. It's not like there's two different lights. It's one light where part of it is being received directly in to the individual, into their perception, And part of it is used to reflect, which means to observe, right? It's like if someone's going to a party and they're enjoying themselves in the party, you could say that they're 100% direct light, right? They're 100% enjoying themselves in the party. If you start to do reflection, then you're saying that, yes, they're in the party and they're enjoying themselves to an extent, but they're also observing themselves and looking around and looking at how other people are enjoying themselves and analyzing. So you could say that they're not 100% in the party. They're, to the extent that they're doing the observation on the party, is the amount that they're not in the party. So you couldn't say that they're 100% in the party and also 100% observing the party. That can't exist. So the idea is that a certain person has a certain amount of conscious thinking power and focus, and that focus will be spread around. It can either be spent on the activity itself, which would then be 100% in the activity, or it can be spent to part of it, I'll be in the activity, but I'm also going to observe it and see, what is my relationship towards it? All that kind of thinking power is taking away from living in the activity itself. And that is the reflected line. So you can't have a situation where you're 100% in the party and 100% observing the party.
But he's saying that you're reflecting 100%. So if you're reflected 100% and 80% is used to make up the vessels of the reflected vessels or the vessels of the Rosh.
You're not reflecting.
Going into the individual, then you would have 80% going out.
You're not reflecting 100%. You're not reflecting 100%. You're reflecting 80%.
So what happens to the other 20% that's being reflected by Malhut, by the Masak?
Right. The 20%. All right, we've got 100%. 100% is going to be divided into 3 parts. 20% is what I'm going to be feeling. Let's say I'm at the party, I'm enjoying myself. 20% is going to be spent on clothing it and having an observation on my enjoyment of the party. And then 60% is going to be outside. I'm not using it at the moment. I'm not consciously using that energy. I don't have the ability to use that tension.
So 20% is for the mental activities of clothing, the vessels, and then you have 80% left, 60 for the vessels, the making of the vessels of the reflected light.
No, 20.
Rosh, and then you have 20% of internal of being reflected out.
No. It's 60.
Or 60% is reflected back out as Or Makif, and 20% goes into the Parsif.
Yeah, so in the individual, in the spiritual face, it's 20% clothed by 20%. And then the 60%.
Say it again.
In the individual, in the spiritual Parsif, in the spiritual face, right, you're going to have 20% clothing 20%, and the other 60% is going to be outside.
So you will have 40% inside the vessel,
right?
60% surrounding light, and when you look at the 40%, you're saying it's 20% direct light and 20% reflected light clothing it. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay. And the 20% direct light is the experience, as you called it, and the 20% clothing that we put on it is the observation we add on top of it.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like they say that today people, when they go to concerts, they're not enjoying themselves like in the past, because in the past, you'd go to a concert, you'd be in a concert. Now someone, they take out their mobile phones and they're trying to, film the concert. Well, then they're not totally absorbed into the concert. So the idea of them taking, pictures and taking videos, that is like an observation. You're being outside of it. Instead of being in the concert and enjoying the event, you, on one hand, there's a certain amount that you're enjoying the event, but there's also a certain amount that you're not enjoying the event because you're trying to observe the event and take pictures of it and take videos of it. So you can see that correlation between spirituality and physicality, where in this generation, a lot of people are not just enjoying activities, they're also spending a lot of that energy on observing the activity that they're enjoying. So of course their enjoyment is going to be less than someone who's just totally absorbed into the event. Does that make sense?
Actually, yes. Makes good sense, because it's like you say, if you're thinking about the event, then you're not totally immersed in it. It's the same thing in sports. If you're thinking about the play that you're involved in, then you're not using all your instincts and ability. You're delayed because you're thinking.
Exactly. All right, I guess we'll move on. Circle versus line.
Circle versus line. Baal HaSalam. However, there is a big difference between the reception in Bechina Dalet, phase 4, prior to the Zimzum restriction, and the reception of the Or Hazer, reflected light, after the Zimzum restriction, as now it is clothed only a thin line in Rosh, head of Sof end. This is what the Masak screen did through its striking on the upper light. And the measure that was rejected from Ak, primordial man, by the Masak screen, the full measure of upper light from Ein Sof, boundless, that wanted to clothe in Bechina Dalet, phase 4, had it not been for the Masak screen that halted it, became the Or Makif surrounding light, surrounding Ak, primordial man. Explanation. However, there is a big difference between the perception of the individual before the barrier and after the barrier, as now the individual is only handling a small amount of tension that is converted into internal power. This is what the screen in the individual does through its striking on the tension of reality, and the measure of tension that was rejected by the screen became the tension that affected the individual in an indirect, subtle manner.
Circle. Explanation. However, there is a big difference between the perception of the individual before the barrier. So the idea is that we're going to be talking about now the difference between a circle and a line. And the idea is that when we talk about an igul, which is a circle represents in spirituality no discernments, right? When we're talking about all these things of, it going in, it going out, it reflected, it's going up, down. We're talking about not physical space, we're talking about discernments in our perception. So the circle in our perception represents the concept of abstraction, of no discernments. Just like we say that before the barrier, there's these 4 phases of direct light, and they're all circles, and you go from one circle to the other. What does it mean that there's no discernments? You can say, well, I can see there's a difference between people and humanity and stuff. The idea is that when we're saying no discernments, we're talking about from an advancement perspective. So we're not saying that there's no discernments at all and you can't see people before the barrier. Of course we see people before the barrier. The idea is that from a spiritual perspective, there's no difference between one circle and the other. Each circle is equal to each other. There's no advantage being in the spiritual society or being in humanity. Because at the end of the day, you need all those circles within you. And you need to treat them as, yes, there's cause and consequence between them. But the idea is that there's no idea of advancement. The advancement is laid on top of the circles. And so the idea is you have to sort of separate between the foundation, which are the circles, where you have the person in the middle, which is this, the individual. And then you have outside of it, he looks around and he sees a group. And he looks even more out and he sees the society. And he looks even more out and he sees humanity. He looks even more out and he sees nature. The idea is that none of those phases are more important than the other. Each of them are needed, right? It's like, who's more important, the group or nature? It's like, no one's more important. You need all of them. You can't have a group if you're not living on planet Earth. And you can't, just have planet Earth without a group. You need all these different parts within you. And advancement is constantly dealing with the different relationships towards those circles, towards those phases, which are just circles. They contain the abundance, they contain the endless opportunities of spiritual advancement. But when we're actually going to deal with spiritual advancement, we're going to deal with it on a line. We're going to deal with it on a relationship to the advancement of the self. The circles themselves aren't related to the advancement of the individual. They're just the building blocks that enable the foundation, the physical foundation for the individual.
There's something, on one hand, I understand what you're saying, that, in terms of advancement, they're all needed and they're all important, and they are the foundations, and there's no discernment in terms of advancement because it only begins after you cross the barrier, and then you have sort of like, you're really beginning to build the individual, the creator's perspective inside you. But yet at the same time, when we're thinking about the spiritual society and the group and so forth, we do think that the group is more developed than the spiritual society in terms of its ego being more developed and more coarse. So do you not count that as a discernment towards advancement?
If you look at humanity, right, which is more coarse, right, it's got more egos than nature. It doesn't. When you're dealing with advancement, you have a goal. And even when we're before the barrier, if you have the goal, you basically have a line in potential. And if you don't have the goal, then it just becomes a circle again. So the idea is that it's the line that defines the advancement. You have a goal and you're moving towards that goal. And then you have priorities. Those priorities are layered on top of the circles which don't have priorities. So for example, if let's say someone's before the barrier, they lose the goal, then they don't care about advancement anymore. So it's like whatever phase they're in, that they fell down to in a shell, there's no discernment there. There's nothing to be used for advancement, since the person doesn't even want advancement. He doesn't even have the goal of revealing his internal power. People in humanity, people in the spiritual society, or even the group or individual can get stuck. They no longer want to advance. So they're still in a circle. It's no discernment. It's the line that enables the whole concept of advancement. But that line is, of course, layered on top of the circles, on top of the foundation.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay. Line. And after the barrier, as now the individual is only handling a small amount of tension that is converted into internal power. So the curve, the line, represents discernments. And the reason why it represents discernments is the idea is that there's somewhere that you're not receiving, you're prioritizing. You're saying this is higher than something, or this is lower than something. And it's important to remember that another reason difference between the line and the circle. With the circle, remember, we're receiving 100% into it. So there's no calculation of one being above the other. You're before the barrier, you're at 4.4.4, you're receiving all the light into your vessel. There's no discernment. You're like, well, what do you mean there's no discernment? Well, because you're receiving everything in and you're not doing any reflection, well, then you're not actually feeling what you're having. You're not actually feeling internal power. You're not doing any kind of reflection. It's only when you have a line, then you have the concept of reflection, because the line shows the idea of you've got above and below, you've got top and down. Right? The top of the line and the bottom of the line. With the circle, there's no top and down. So the idea is that only when you have a screen, then you have a line. When you have a screen, then you're able to actually do that observation. And with the circle, there's no observation. There's no screen. There's no conversion. There's no reflection. So you could, for example, if we brought it into a corporeal sense, you could say that being in a party and enjoying the party is a circle, and observing while you're in the party is a line. Because you've got something that you're relating to. You're looking at the party, and you're wanting to not totally be immersed into the party. You want to observe yourself in the party. So you already have a priority of, how much am I going to allow myself to be immersed into the party? Well, when you just have a circle, you're just immersed in the situation. There's no question. You're not doing a calculation of how much you want to be immersed into the event, into the situation. I'll continue. Calculation. This is what the screen in the individual does through its striking on the tension of reality. The measure of tension that was rejected by the screen became the tension that affected the individual in an indirect, subtle manner. So this can show a simple calculation of how it works. So we've got the phase 4, Bchina Daled, after the barrier, we've got Aviyut, coarseness of phase 4. So in the phase 4, we've got Keter crown, Chochmah wisdom, Bina understanding, Tiferet beauty, and Malchut kingdom, which we said is nature, humanity, the society, the group, and the individual. We're subtracting with our screen phase 4, Bchina Daled, which is the kashut, the hardness of the screen. But what is it subtracting? It's not subtracting everything. It's only subtracting the phase 4, because it's subtracting the tension. It's subtracting the energy that would have allowed me to really be immersed into the event, into the situation, into reality. So I'm removing that intensity. And then the result is, in my Or Pnimi, in my inner light, I've only got Bchina Gimel, which is phase 3, because I've got Keter crown, Chochmah wisdom, Bina understanding, and Tiferet beauty. But I don't have Bchina Daled, I don't have phase 4. So I've only got what I'm feeling is nature, humanity, the society, and the group. But I'm not allowing me as an individual to be swallowed into the event. I'm observing myself from above, and therefore the parts of me, which is the nature within me, the humanity within me, the group within me, the society within me, and the group within me, with those desires, I'm willing to enjoy life. But with the individual, with my craving, with my desire to be swallowed into the event, I'm putting that on hold. I'm rejecting it. I'm using that hardness in my screen to reject that. And then I'm able to use that energy to observe the events that I'm going through in life after the barrier.
So basically, it's Masaka is keeping you from falling into your emotions.
Stopping you from falling into your emotions, your thoughts, and into reality itself. You feel yourself as separate from reality. You can now have the ability to see yourself from the side and not see yourself as just a normal person running around like everybody else around us. You can actually have that separation. It's very subtle, right? So we're not talking about changes in your physical eyes. It's not like suddenly you're zooming out the situation. It's that you feel a sense of disconnection, a sense of separation from the system. You have a sense of separation from reality. That if beforehand you were just submerged into reality, so of course I'm a person in reality. Look, I've got my body and stuff. What you're saying, I'm not in reality. When you're rejecting a bit of that sort of life, you could say, within you, it allows you to suddenly push back and say, whoa, I can actually observe myself as separate from the reality I'm living in. I can view myself as separate from people talking to me. And if someone's saying something to me, can I observe it? Can I deal with it before it immediately causes an emotional response? And that's what we're talking about here.
Realizing it before it actually happens and reacting to it, you're saying?
You're reacting, there's two. So, we normally divide the lights into two parts. It's either alignment or expression. So alignment is when your response is really quick while it's happening or after it's happening, right? So you're reducing the lag time, the response time for you to able to, you might, for let's say, someone's going to have to, you might for, a split second have your initial response, but then you're after a split second immediately able to take control over it. So that would be a very small response time. With expression, that's when you're being active towards reality. You're able to predict things. You're so much in the flow of reality that you actually feel things when they're going down in the cascading of the manifestation of things into reality. You can feel them before they manifest, and then it's like you're being like sort of faster than reality. It's like being faster than the speed of light, because instead of normally where you're having to react to things, now you're being proactive instead of reactive. We'll move on. Phases of completion.
phases of completion, Baal Sulam. The reason is that there is no change or absence in spiritual. And since the light of Ein Sof, boundless, is drawn to Ak, primordial man, to close in Bchina Dalet, phase 4, it must therefore be so. Even though the Masach screen has now detained it and repelled it, it does not negate the extension of Ein Sof, boundless. On the contrary, it sustains it, but in a different manner, through multiplication of zivugim, mating, plural case zivug, mating, in the 5 worlds, Ak, primordial man, and Abiyah, emanation, creation, formation, action, until the end of correction, when Bchina Dalet, phase 4, is completely corrected through them. At that time, Ein Sof boundless will clothe in her as in the beginning. Explanation. The reason is that there is no change or absence in the tension of the individual. Since the tension is extracted to the conscious mind of the individual after the barrier, to close in the perception, it must fully be handled at some point. Hence, even though the screen has now detained it and repelled it, it does not negate the attraction of the full degree of tension for the person. On the contrary, it sustains it, but in a different manner, through multiplications of mating in 5 worlds, primordial man, emanation, creation, formation, and action, until the end of correction, where the egoism of the individual is completely corrected through them. At that time, the full tension will clothe in the individual as prior to the barrier as internal power.
Delayed perfection. Explanation. The reason is that there is no change or absence in the tension of the individual. Since the tension is attracted to the conscious mind of the individual after the barrier, to clothe in their perception, it must be fully handled at some point. So what we have is a quick scale of how we're dealing with our egoism from the barrier until end of correction. So when we cross the barrier until the end of primordial man, which is from 1.1 to 1.4, we're dealing with Bchina Gimel, phase 3 of our egoism. Right? We're dealing with the root phase, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 within us, within the individual. Then afterwards, from 1.4 all the way to 4.3, we're dealing with Kilim Dashpa, which are the vessels of bestowal. So it takes the phase 4 egoism and divides it into 2, where you've got the vessels of bestowal and the vessels of reception. And we're dealing mostly with the vessels of bestowal from 1.4 all the way to 4.3. And then from 4.3 until the end of correction, then we receive, at the resurrection of the dead, which is 4.4, we receive Bchina Dalet, the phase 4. We also receive the vessels of reception. And then at the end of correction, we now have a full egoism intact with the screen on top.
So the middle section from 1.4 to 4.3 then is just the completion or the creation of the vessels of bestowal outside of ourselves?
Yeah, it's basically dealing with that your adventure is mostly dealing with smallness. You're mostly dealing with the vessels of bestowal. You're dealing with the egoism, which is above the parsa, above the diaphragm. And then in Resurrection of the Dead, that's when you're dealing now with a complete sort of ego of both above and below the parsa, the diaphragm. So from the barrier until 1.4, you're basically dealing with above the tabor, above the navel. And then from 1.4 until 4.3, you're dealing with above the parsa. And then onwards, you now have the full height. You have all your egoism corrected and under correction.
So you're sort of like going down through the parsut in the corrections.
Exactly. Let's move on. Broken down into payments. Hence, even though the screen has now detained it and repelled it, it does not negate the attraction of the full degree of tension for the person. On the contrary, it sustains it, but in a different manner. Through multiplication of matings in the five worlds, primordial man, emanation, creation, formation, and action, until the end of correction, where the egoism of the individual is completely corrected through them. At that time, the full tension will clothe the individual as prior to the barrier as internal power. So here we have a visualization of all the different worlds and how it basically in the end we're covering all the way down to end of correction. So we've got from the pair, the mouth, which is basically where the individual starts, until the taboo of the navel. What we're dealing with in primordial man, Adam Kadmon, we're dealing with relationships. How do I connect with others? How do I connect to others? What do I think of others? You're dealing not with yourself, you're mostly dealing with the phases around you. You're looking from above, you're looking in that separated point, and you're looking down, and you're saying, what do we have here? Oh, I see nature, humanity. Oh, that's interesting. Look how they're working. It's like you suddenly become like the Discovery Channel on humans. So most people can watch Discovery Channel on nature, but they can't do Discovery Channel on themselves, on humans, on people. And that's where you get that ability after you cross the barrier. Then when you reach 2.1, you are mostly, you get a sort of a taste of these four worlds of Atzilut, emanation, Bria, creation, Yetzirah, formation, and Asiya, action. But you only get it for a sort of a small amount. And most of what you're dealing with is Atzilut, emanation, the observational point of how much control do I feel over my life. And then as you do the corrections on Bria, creation, which is affinity, how do I feel about myself? Then after you do a correction on Yetzirah, formation, which is communication, how do people make me feel? And then finally you correct Asiya, action, which is reality, how does nature or objects make me feel? And towards this whole process, you always have Olam Hazeh, which is the sword, which is which is below the spiritual face. And this is, what do I physically sense in reality? So you're always having, after the barrier, you're always having this, at least a separation between what I physically sense in reality, and how do I respond to it, or how does it make me feel, or what do I think about it?
In Adam Kadmon, you write, how do I connect to others? And I can relate to it because we build a relationship to the different phases prior to the barrier, like our relationship to the nature, to the society, humanity, spiritual society, group, and so forth. Do we also build there our relationship to the individual within us?
No. It's like hidden from the person.
So the last and most advanced relationship that we're building there is toward the group?
Yes. And to ourselves in the group, but not to ourselves as a separate. When we're talking about separation, right? So someone could say, well, I can do this before the barrier. I always constantly think, how do I connect to others and how much control do I feel of my life? The idea is that we're talking about where there's separation between you and the thing that you're dealing with. So to feel how much control do I feel of my life, you have to feel a separation between yourself and your life. And you don't have that sensation before the barrier. Only after the barrier do you have that sensation. So at the beginning, that sensation of separation is only in the relationships, how to connect to others. You're able to see a difference between yourself and nature, humanity, the spiritual society, and the group. Where you can't see a difference is between yourself and yourself. You just see yourself. It's just me. I feel separation between me and my reality. Afterwards, it starts to become more nuanced. Inside myself, I break myself into pieces. And therefore, I'm able myself to look at myself. Because I have these separations within me. And that's what the screen does. And that's why it says that there's a screen between Atzilut and Bria, and there's another screen between Bria and Yetzirah, and there's another screen between Yetzirah and Asiya, right? That allows those separations to be made to able to observe these different parts. If you don't have that screen, then you're not able to observe it. So if you don't have a screen on top of Asiya, that means you haven't done that correction on Asiya, which is at 4.3. You're not able to feel that separation between yourself and how does nature or objects make me feel. You're not able to do that observation. If you haven't done the correction of Yetzirah, then you can't feel that separation between myself and how do people make me feel. You can't separate between me as a communicative feeling sensation device and the response of how do people make me feel. You're not able to observe that response. You're not able to make changes to it. So it's only when you have a screen on top of a phase can you deal with it. So you have the screen on top of Adam Kadmon, primordial man, and then you're able to observe your relationships. Then afterwards you have a screen on top of Atzilut, and you're able to observe how much control do I feel over my life and deal with these various sensations. Then afterwards you have a screen on top of Bria, and then you're able to ask that question, how do I feel about myself? Because there's a separation between me and how do I feel about me? And so forth. Each time you have a screen, and the screen on top of something allows you to live above it instead of inside of it. Instead of inside that feeling. For example, if you didn't have that screen, then let's say you didn't have the screen above Bria, you wouldn't able to ask that question of how do I feel about myself and have a separation between the feeling of yourself and the observation of that feeling. So anyone could ask, oh, I feel about myself, I feel sad, I feel happy, but they're not able to observe a different feeling between feeling happy and the feeling of observing that feeling of happiness.
Tell me if the following is correct. In Adam Kadmon, I build a relationship to nature, humanity, spiritual society, and the group. As you said, I cannot build a relationship to myself because it's a loop. I need to have some kind of separation from myself in order to do that.
Yes.
And therefore, the four following phases, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, is actually how I take myself and I break myself into the observer, which is the emanation, and Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah, which are the parts that are being observed. And this is actually the me being broken into the different parts in me. Is that a fair description or totally off?
No, exactly. And the ability to do observations on affinity, on communication, on reality, right, is possible because you have screens on each of them. So on each of them, you can observe on them. So you have the general observation, and then you also have an observation on each of the worlds to allow you to raise those observations to, to able to observe what's happening there. So if you're just in, let's say, Atzilut, then you can ask the question of how much control do I feel of my life, because you have a separation between yourself and the control of yourself, right? Between the sensation of yourself and the sensation of the control that I have over my life. They become two separate entities, you could say. And then when you have the screen on top of Bria, then you can have a feeling of yourself, of how you feel about yourself. So they become two separate parts. That's what the screen does. The screen allows you to take the thoughts and emotions and break them down into between feeling the sensation you're meant to feel and also able to break it down into partly observing what you're feeling.
Quite a cool system, I have to say.
I agree. So that is, if you don't have a screen on something, either because it's broken or you haven't reached that correction yet, then what will happen is that you weren't able to observe yourself as separate from the question. You're just able to observe yourself in the question. Like, let's say, for example, you're playing a game and you lose, right? That feeling of losing the game is reality. How does nature or objects make me feel? So a normal person, when he feels that sensation, he feels it. He feels that loss. What he's not able to do is feel two sensations. Feel the sensation of the loss of the game and feel another sensation of observing what was the response of me losing from the game. A normal person doesn't break himself into those pieces. He's not like, he loses the game, he's very frustrated, he's angry that he lost the game. He's not at the same time observing and saying, look at me getting angry. That's very, very interesting response. People outside can look at the person and say, oh, why is he getting so angry and stuff? They're able to do the observation because they feel separation between, at least in reality, they're seeing separation between them as a person and you as a person. Still inside reality, they're not able to separate themselves between themselves and reality. But inside reality, they're able to do that separation. And therefore they can say, oh, why is he getting so angry? But when someone is getting angry themselves, they can't observe while they're getting angry that they're getting angry. And that's what spirituality allows you to do with the screen. It allows you to, you can get angry at something, and at the same time, simultaneously, you're like, oh, that's very interesting that I'm getting angry at that. And you're feeling both. You're feeling the intense anger. You're really pissed. And at the same time, you're looking at yourself from the side and saying, do I want to continue being angry? Maybe it's good that I'm being angry. I'm showing everybody else how it's really bothering me. Maybe I should continue this stage, or maybe I should tone it down. And you're both, it's like you become, it's not schizophrenic, because schizophrenic is when you're one or the other. Here you're in both situations. You're at the same, simultaneously being angry and observing your anger simultaneously.
Well, that just kind of cleared up a dirty concept for me, because I thought that the purpose of this was that we're able to stand outside of any situation and not react in an emotional way at all, and just, just calmly pass through it and not have the anger. And then seeing myself, get emotional with things, I was feeling like I'm not doing something right, but I was still doing, calculations too, but I still sensed or thought that I wasn't doing the right thing by having any emotion involved. But now that's clear for me. Thanks.
We're not trying to turn into robots. And part of the thing is, people like imagine the holy person as being, totally invulnerable, that nothing can harm him. But you can't go and have life with people and just be totally emotionally unavailable. That is someone who's blocking themselves. They're not feeling themselves. They're not allowing themselves to respond to situations. If someone is pressuring you with something, you want to able to have the ability of saying, this is too much. But how can you have that if you have no emotional feedback from yourself? And you're like, yep, layer it on me, layer it on me, layer it on me. You need to have a balance of how much you can actually handle. So for that, you need emotion. Remember, the only people that don't feel emotion are people which are sick. Right? There's children, for example, they can't feel pain. So you're like, oh, that'd be amazing if I had the power to not feel pain. It's like there are children, there are people that can't feel pain. And then when they put their hand on a hot stove, they can burn their hand without noticing, because they get no response, no feedback in their mind saying, oh, what you're putting your hand on is really, really hot. So they still get burned, right? But they're not getting that emotion. They're not feeling that they're getting burned. And that's the other thing, that when we're going through this process, we're so much more aware. If before and in the past, before the barrier, if you were to get angry, you wouldn't notice you were angry until after you cool down. And then you're like, oh, what did I do? Oh, wow, why did I say that? Oh, yeah, I was angry, right? But when you're angry, you're like, I'm not angry. I'm just raising my voice. But after the barrier, when you have those screens on those different parts, you're able to be really angry and simultaneously say, you're angry right now. It's like, yeah. And it's like, well, do you know, is there an advantage of you being angry? Should you raise the tone or lower the tone? It's like, maybe lower the tone a bit. Or, you should actually raise the tone. You're not angry enough. They're not really responding to your anger. You really show them that you're just totally pissed. But you're doing it simultaneously. You're not afterwards saying, oh, I should have got more angry. Or you're not afterwards saying, oh, I should have been less angry. You're able to affect and monitor yourself at runtime, at real time, at simultaneously while it's going on, and not just having that observation after the fact of saying, oh yeah, I should have shown more excitement. I should have shown less excitement. You can have that conversation with yourself while you're going through it.
But if you didn't have that conversation during you're going to it, wouldn't it give you a better time to observe and see how you're reacting without interjecting yourself into it, to see what is causing the core reason for that response?
You're able to do it simultaneously.
Without waiting at all.
Exactly, without waiting. It's real time. It's like, in computers where you can play music, right? And you can also open a document and you can start some kind of process, and it's all working at the same time. How is that possible? I only have one CPU, let's say. It's quickly switching between them. So from your experience, you're experiencing it as if they're happening at the same time, even though technically it's constantly switching between the feelings. So it's like you feel as a person, you feel all these different emotions and observations at the same time. It could be that you're just very quickly switching between them, but your experience tells you otherwise. Your experience tells you, no, I'm doing it simultaneously.
You're doing it in separate vessels.
Exactly. And that's what the screen does. It creates that separation between, it creates a separation, and then what you want the different vessels is to have a screen on each vessel, to have a screen on each situation, on each context. So then you can simultaneously have these 5 lines of thought within you and experience also 5 different emotional sets.
Now, each of these vessels coming down to the Parsif, Adam Kadmon, Absolute, Berea, etc., they are what we created in 1.1 through 1.4.
So in Adam Kadmon Primordial Man is 1.1 to 1.4.
And then each of these I'll get added on as we go through the different phases, moving up towards end correction.
Exactly. So it's not like a direct correlation. It's not like here you're from 2.1 to 2.4, and then afterwards from here from 3.1 to 3.4. But rather what happens is that you then are dealing with from the tabor, the navel, down to the parsa diaphragm in 2.1. In 2.2, you get a taste of having the entire height until the end of legs. Then you break. Then you return to being in the diaphragm, between the navel and the diaphragm. And then you correct. You basically put a screen on creation. Then afterwards put a screen on formation, which is like, so in creation it's going to be 4.1. On formation it's going to be 4.2. And then finally put a screen on this action 4.3. Then you reactivate the entire structure, and that's resurrection of the dead. And then a few more corrections, and then you reach end of correction. We have this full structure with various screens to allow you to observe being inside and above the situation.
Thank you.
I'll move on. Present and future.
Present and future, Valha Salam. Thus no change or absence has been affected there by the striking of the sock, the screen, in the upper light. This is the meaning of what is written in the Zohar. The Zavug mating of En Sof, boundless, does not descend until it is given its pair. Meanwhile, that is until that time, it is considered that the light of En Sof, boundless, has become or Makif, surrounding light, meaning it will clothe in it in the future, for now it circles it and shines upon it from outside with a certain illumination. This illumination accustoms it to expand by the right laws that will bring it to receive this or Makif, surrounding light, in the measure of En Sof, boundless, was initially drawn to it. Explanation. Thus no change or absence has been affected in the tension by the striking of the screen. This is the meaning of what it is written in the Zohar. The mating of boundless does not descend until it is given its pair. Meanwhile, that is, until that time, it is considered that the full capacity of tension has become surrounding light, meaning it will clothe in the perception of the individual in the future. For now it circles them and shines upon them from the outside of their perception with a certain illumination. This illumination accustoms the perception to expand by the right laws that will bring the individual to receive this full tension in the measure that was initially drawn to them before the barrier.
Explanation. Thus, no change or absence has been affected in the tension by the striking of the screen. This is the meaning of what is written in the Zohar: the mating and boundless does not descend until it's given its pair. So the pair we have is between egoism, which is the ratzon, the desire, and altruism, which is the masach, the screen. And the idea is that if before the barrier we built our entire egoism, after the barrier we're building our entire screen. And when our screen has been completed, this screen can then be applied onto the full egoism. And that's the pair, the connection between them. And that you reach at end of correction. So the screen is on top of the egoism. You've constantly got this combination between the screen and the desire that it's on. Present and future. Meanwhile, that is, until that time, it is considered that the full capacity of tension has become surrounding light, meaning it will clothe in the perception of the individual in the future. For now, it circles them and shines upon them from the outside of their perception with a certain illumination. This illumination accustoms the perception to expand by the right laws that will bring the individual to receive this full tension in the measure that was initially drawn to them before the barrier. Right? So then, I've ended here with a diagram of the spiritual face. So the idea is that, you've got the direct light, the Orishah, hitting the screen, the Masach, right, which is the Malchut of Mr. Vega, the mating kingdom, and part of it is reflecting back, which is called the Orchos, the reflected light, which is going to clothe the direct light, and that in the end goes into the face, into the spiritual face, and becomes all Pnimi, inner light. So it's the reflected light of the direct light reflected, right? The reflected light is the direct light reflected with the direct light, right? As we said, 20%, 20%, and that becomes the inner light. And that ends at the Malchut HaMesayim, at the ending kingdom. And the amount that should have been entering into the Sof, which is the ego, which is the phase 4, instead what only comes down is only reflected light. And the surrounding light, that was the direct light that should have gone into the phase 4, is not received. It's circling from outside. And circling from outside, we're not talking about physical. It basically means that when you have a vessel and it has inner light, it's a sensation that is felt within the person, within the perception, within the individual. Surrounding light is an illumination. It affects it from afar. The person feels that there's more to come, and that is the illumination of the surrounding light. So because he feels that sensation of there's more to come, that faith, basically, but he knows that it's not in, that's why we say that it's surrounding it. And the reason why it's called a circle, that is, it's circling, is because there's no screen involved, because the screen hasn't been applied to that direct light, hasn't been clothed, and therefore it's light without a screen. And therefore, as we said beforehand, that anything which is without a screen is considered a circle, and anything that was with a screen is considered a line. Well, I think we'll stop here and enter the after party.